Welcome aboard to the Captain Crypto Show. Today, we join the Captain's Council to discuss the latest developments in the world of cryptocurrency. Here's your host, Kylan Hurt.
All right, all you scallywags, welcome back to the Captain Crypto Show. Tonight, it's November 8th, 2017, and that means it's another roundtable discussion at Captain Crypto's Captain's Council. Tonight, we have one of our co-hosts, who you might remember from last week. Jacob, why don't you say hi?
Hey guys.
So for those of you who are not familiar with Jacob, we did a little bit of an intro last week, so if you want to find out a little bit more about his background, feel free to check out last week's Captain's Council. But tonight, we're also joined by a new co-host. So Jackson, how's it going?
I'm doing great. Happy to be here.
So Jackson, why don't you tell the listeners at home a little bit about yourself, how you got into cryptocurrency, what year you first heard about it. Give them a little bit of a background about where you're coming from.
Sure. Well, I like to consider myself the average Bitcoiner. I say that because it seems like everybody has a very similar story when they get into Bitcoin, and it starts out with finding out about it, dismissing it, and then falling down the rabbit hole about 2 weeks later when they realize it goes a little bit deeper than they thought. And then another story that everybody gets punched in the gut pretty early on where they lose some money or lose some Bitcoin. And I followed that same path just like everybody else. So I consider myself the average Bitcoiner in that way.
Yeah, we call it earning your stripes around here, right?
Sounds about right.
So how did you, I'm curious then, do you remember what your first memory or the first time you heard about Bitcoin, where it was, or maybe what year are we talking?
I think it was around late 2013. I remember I was sitting in church and my mom was trying to get me to pay attention, but I just heard about this Bitcoin thing, and I'm trying to work it out in my mind.
It was in one of the verses, right, where Jesus talks about Bitcoin in the future of cryptocurrency.
In the Genesis, I believe
the
it
Genesis
was. The Genesis
block. There you
block.
go.
Well, I hope they accept Bitcoin charity donations now.
Oh, yeah, Bitcoin tithing. I think it's the thing already.
There you go, the mining fee.
Oh, you're going to owe a lot this year.
But yeah, that was my initial dismissal just in my mind. I couldn't figure it out and decided that it wasn't worth my time and paid the price.
All right, well, Jackson, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
All right, for those of you who have not been paying too much attention to the cryptocurrency today was actually a huge day in cryptocurrency, specifically for Bitcoin. When I woke up, there was no news, but by the time I was driving on my way to work, I found out that apparently the SegWit2X fork that was supposed to happen on approximately November 16th will not be happening. This was going to be a very contentious hard fork. There were a lot of people who were at each other's throats, a lot of emotional arguments going around. And about, I think it was 9 a.m. Pacific time, I found out that it had been called off. I guess the people who had agreed to do the fork, to conduct the fork, came to some sort of agreement, and they are going to, what's the term, indefinitely suspend the fork, which makes it kind of sound like it's essentially dead. So Jackson, I'm sure you've heard the news. What were your thoughts when you first heard the news?
Sure. It was pretty monumental. I think it's pretty fortunate that I got my first opportunity to be on this podcast on the day of this event. I think it is an event that proved one of the key characteristics of Bitcoin, and that is that it's hard to change and that you won't be able to enforce your will on it. So it was some of the biggest people in Bitcoin coming together trying to force an upgrade to the network, and the network being able to resist that.
But don't you think that already happened with Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Gold? I mean, how many times do we have to see this over and over again?
Yeah, I do think it has happened before, but I think this is probably the strongest attempt yet. And I think the key difference between this and Bitcoin Cash is the fact that Bitcoin Cash to eventually capitulate and add replay protection.
But the thing is, this one didn't even go through. I mean, the other ones, do you think it's actually like a negative thing that we actually didn't get to see this play out? Like, they sort of backed down from their attack, and we actually didn't see the attack happen on the network. I think it would have been interesting to actually see that.
Yeah, I think I actually agree with you. I think it would have been more interesting and a better test to see it actually go through. But I think why we didn't see that happen is it would have been very expensive for the people on the wrong side of the fork, and I think it was very clear who was on the wrong side. The community was...
Those are some strong words right there.
As far as community support, as far as technical support, I think you could have arguments about that, but I think community was very clearly on one side.
Why I guess for spending on the wrong chain, that's why it would be expensive, right?
Yeah, I think mining on the wrong chain is where you'd see expensive. Plus, if you wanted to really support that fork, you would need to sell the side of the fork that you didn't agree with. So if you were selling Bitcoin to buy SegWit2X coins, then that would be very expensive for you if nobody else did it.
Yeah, I think another thing that a lot of people do not think about because they're not developers, but here at Edge, we make mobile wallets and we try to support the major currencies. Bitcoin is obviously the big one, right? And every time there's a fork, there's this question of, okay, what are we going to do? Are we going to support the currency? How much support are we going to give it? And that means that's extra man hours, and that these sorts of forks, you can't really predict when they're going to be announced. I'm not talking about when they actually are going to occur, but when they are going to be announced. And this can add unexpected costs to a team's projects. And we have a lot of fledgling companies in the space that are either maybe they're not profitable or they're barely profitable. And so to have something like a fork, it adds a lot of costs and it can cause a lot of turmoil. And I think it's probably causing a lot of turmoil in ways that maybe we don't even see. I see it as a developer and as a user, but obviously for miners, it can cause other issues. It's something that affects everyone in the ecospace.
Yeah, and I agree that is kind of a bummer, but I also think it's necessary. Like, the fact that all the developers just did all that work and now they have experience dealing with that kind of issue is going to be inoculating the network to that kind of attack in the future.
Do you think developers from altcoins have sort of taken a hint to not repeat the same mistake?
I think so, too. I think that what Bitcoin Cash did with their mining emergency difficulty adjustment, I think is what's needed, or a hard fork, or a change in the mining algorithm. Because if you're going to try to compete with Bitcoin just head to head, it's not going to be going well for you. You need to build consensus to change the Bitcoin network.
So I'm kind of curious. I haven't looked into the specifics for replay protection, but Jacob or Jackson, are you guys aware of why they were not doing replay protection? What the reasoning was behind that?
They wanted to replace Bitcoin. They thought they would.
Well, they thought they were Bitcoin, kind of, right?
Yeah,
that's exactly true.
They assumed the network was going to go along with them. What I'm a little unsure about is why they decided now. I mean, it was pretty, to me, and I think to everyone, it was pretty clear that they didn't have consensus yesterday and the day before that. What really was the turning point? I think it was 6 of them, who out of the 6 really, pulled, made us stinky and said, this is not going to work, guys. We need to stop this.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that's the sort of information we might never get, right? I mean, there are some backroom deals, right?
Yeah.
Just rumors and gossip. But definitely, I think when I think of the New York agreement, for those of you who don't know what the New York agreement was, essentially about a year ago in New York, a bunch of big players in Bitcoin decided that something needed to be done with regards to scaling. So the idea was some people wanted big blocks, some people wanted SegWit. And so they came to agreement. They said, okay, well, how about we do both and we hold our noses, come to agreement, work together, we'll do both. But what happened is Bitcoin Cash eventually decided to do a split where they would make a currency that would allow larger blocks. So now SegWit, that occurred when SegWit was activated. I think it's like August 1st, something like that. So it kind of left this, how would I say it? It's almost like the New York agreement was made. It was made with different circumstances, right? Because once Bitcoin Cash existed, then it's like, okay, if you want bigger blocks, then why you just go to Bitcoin Cash? They literally had the same hashing algorithm, right?
Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin itself?
Correct.
Yeah, they both had, so we actually had miners switching between the two chains.
Right, and I think I heard a lot of people saying, oh, well, they have miner support. So it does beg the question of, okay, if you want to do some sort of hard fork or make some big changes to a currency, whose support do you need? Jackson, what do you think?
I just want to say, to this day, that move perplexes me. The fact that they went ahead and launched Bitcoin Cash just kind of out of the blue when it was supposed to be a backup plan, I still don't understand it to this day. But I do think that it did have that effect of splitting the people that wanted big blocks into 2 different communities, and that played out very well for the SegWit1X out of the fork that wanted it. But I think that it's a very defensible position to want to have SegWit and bigger blocks. So I feel like those people actually did get kind of screwed. And I don't think that I would even be on the team of wanting bigger blocks and SegWit at the same time. but just not the way that it was pushed in this way.
What do you guys think about the future of hard forks? Do you think we're going to see another different New York agreement to try to get consensus in the future? Do you think they've learned their lesson?
I don't think that we'll see a hard fork anytime soon. I think we'll see a lot of really clever ways of soft forking in new upgrades, and they will maybe be one Bitcoin hard fork at the very end of development, where they fix like everything they can, but before that they won't hard fork anything.
Do normal Bitcoin upgrades have replay protection, or I don't?
No,
they don't.
Pretty much everything has been a soft fork at this point, so they wouldn't need replay protection.
Oh, that's true.
There won't be another split of the network.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is interesting how, and especially the perception of users, especially the ones that are not super technical, is they saw Bitcoin Cash, and as far as they were concerned, okay, there's some fork that happened. They didn't really have to do much. They ended up with what they perceived as extra money. And then the next fork, obviously there's all sorts of forks, but the next somewhat relevant one was Bitcoin Gold from a couple weeks ago. And on that one, there was a fork. It was a complete mess, it seemed like. And you didn't really get much free money. And supposedly you got like a few $100, but Bitcoin at that point was worth like 6,000. So it was really just a small percentage. And now we have the third major hard fork in a row, or lack of a hard fork, because now the third one's dead. So maybe this is something where either developers are learning that, hey, this is not as easy as you think. And also I think users are they're learning the lesson that this is not always free money, and now it won't always even happen either, right?
I think that's correct. And I think the lesson learned is that you can make free money with Bitcoin forks. You just can't compete with Bitcoin so directly if you want to just make a paycheck. I think we're going to see ICO level Bitcoin forks over the next couple months.
What do you think normal everyday users should do? Do you think they should take a position and sell one chain, or do you think they should just keep both?
I think this is a really interesting question. And one of the things that I've noticed, and everybody's noticed, is that the conventional wisdom in Bitcoin is hold your own keys and it's your money. Don't hold your own keys and it's not your money. Mm-hmm. And the people that are able to reap the reward of these forks so well are the people that have their money on an exchange ready to go day one, where the people that don't have their money on an exchange have to deal with a slow blockchain that's still fledgling, and everybody's trying to cram their transactions onto the blockchain to be able to move to an exchange and sell those coins. Mm-hmm. So I think that is one of the things that is probably the most interesting, the biggest problem with this network. But
at the same time, the exchanges don't always update, for a fork. They don't update your alternative current.
Right,
coin.
Yeah. So if you want to take advantage of it,
futures.
I think your best idea is to have it on the exchange before the fork. That the exchange says that they're going to deal with that specific.
I think it
coin.
depends on the exchange.
You have to know your exchange is going to deal with
local
that fork.
Bitcoins just sold. I got a small deposit of a few Bitcoins because they just sold it. They actually just labeled it as an altcoin drop for all your Bitcoin Cash.
Yeah, I feel like you almost have to read the fine print, because sometimes they'll come out, the headline will say, XYZ company or exchange is going to support the alternative currency, the smaller chain, the fork, right? But then you kind of read this fine print. It's like, they will throw in support where you will eventually be able to get it 6 months down the road. A lot of forked currencies or altcoins don't really survive that long, right?
That's for extreme traders, like if you actually want to make money on price volatility or price discovery. But I think for everyday users, I'm not sure about what they should do. At least for the first few days, I think it'd probably be recommendable to hold on to both until it becomes settled.
Jackson, you said ICO level hard forks. I was curious as to what you meant by that.
I just think that the people that are wanting to put out projects just to make some money on the initial launch of the project, I think that we're going to see those people coming in and trying to do hard forks on Bitcoin with promises of feature lists that will never really come to pass, and really that sound better than they really are. So I think everybody's going to need to be much more weary in Bitcoin than they usually are.
I think that's a very small altcoin though that will come of that. It's like I think if you've heard of Clams, it's a fork that was really small. No one noticed it.
Obviously, there is a lot of money chasing after easy money in this space, though. I mean, half the ICOs are ridiculous jokes that you'd never expect to do anything. But yet they raise millions of dollars, so you don't really need that much to be able to...
I guess. But millions of
made
dollars to
one
Bitcoin
person
is
rich.
like a,
But
Bitcoin gold.
1% of millions of dollars to one person is quite a bit of money.
No, yeah, that's true.
All right, so I think that's enough on that story. And this week, there has been no shortage of drama. I think it was just yesterday we found out that there was a vulnerability in Parity that was, that was exploited. For those of you who don't know what Parity is, that's a wallet that is written for Ethereum. And there was a vulnerability that was related to multi-signature wallets. And they had a smart contract that was written, and some people had been using it for ICOs. I think Gavin Woods was his name, one of the Ethereum founders, had done an ICO for his project was called Polkadot, and they had raised, I think, somewhere in the hundreds of millions of dollars. So essentially, this bug, I believe there have been issues with it before, and they were supposed, obviously, a good developer fixes the bug, right? Well, apparently the bug was not fixed, and someone who went by the username of, I think, DevOps199, something like that, who I'm not sure if anyone knows his real identity, and it's probably better that way, right? But he was poking around, and I don't even know if it's he, but this person was looking at the code and decided that they thought there might be some vulnerability, so they poked at it and they told this smart contract essentially to kill itself. At least they did that in code, right? And apparently that's exactly what it did, and it took something like $280 million worth of Ethereum with it. So obviously that's a big loss, especially if that's your project that has a bunch of the money in it. But it kind of does beg the question of, and this is kind of what I've been thinking, is Ethereum moving too quickly? Because we've seen these sorts of issues with Ethereum multiple times. I know they're pushing the envelope with smart contracts and being able to write programmable money, but if they are missing out, if their code review processes are not good enough, are they moving too quickly? Jacob, what do you think?
Well, yeah, if they're losing millions of dollars, they definitely are. But I don't know what their total losses are between the DAO and this big mistake.
Yeah, I think DAO was somewhere around. Well, they were able to salvage some of the money from the DAO. And for those of you at home who don't know what the DAO is, I'll eventually do an episode on it. But that was another big hack that happened where hundreds of millions of dollars were lost, or almost that amount. So this is not new to Ethereum. So Jackson, when you heard this news, what were your thoughts?
First thing I did is just laugh. I think this is so silly. For one, this particular wallet implementation just had an issue where they lost millions of dollars.
Right, I think that was back in July.
Value.
It was just a couple months ago.
So that's one thing. But then even before that, storing private keys for cryptocurrency in an immutable blockchain, which I'm not sure Ethereum is at this point, is a very dangerous thing to do. You do very carefully. And so we buy things like hardware wallets to secure our private keys so that they are air gapped from the internet and have no chance of leaking the private keys. And these people are using a very experimental blockchain world computer to store their private keys. I don't understand why you would want to do that and why you wouldn't just use a hardware wallet. And
I don't understand why they're using real money. Why don't they use testnet network to test this out? I mean, obviously it's not up to spec with,
Yeah, they thought it was. But millions and millions of dollars are stored on
You could put thousands and,
the thing is,
most of Ethereum right now is all, most of crypto, a lot of it, a lot of the implementations, they're really theoretical at this point. We're not actually touching any, end user experiences right now. We don't have to have all this money. We can do the test. We can do it. If you want to put real money, put $10.
Well, I think this is what I had to think about this for a while. I was like, okay, why are they putting so much money in it? Yeah. And it's my understanding that as of late, especially during the month of October, the amount of money raised for your average ICO and ICOs, these are Ethereum ICOs I'm talking about, as a whole, it's starting to dry up. So what I was thinking is maybe this was something, and I guess it must have been like this, when they were writing the smart contract, they probably saw, oh my gosh, this is moving so quickly. We need to get in while we still can. And to a certain extent, maybe they were correct in the sense that if they were to try to do an ICO now, they wouldn't have raised nearly as much money. But obviously that comes at the cost of, well, now you have you have this vulnerability that's been exploited, and you probably have a bunch of investors who are pretty darn ticked off because now their money seems to be gone.
That seems like a short-term outlook on it, right? Let's risk millions of dollars now so that we can get it quickly instead of waiting and doing things right and in a secure fashion. And I think that's what a lot of ICOs are, like a short-term outlook. And I don't know, it doesn't look good long-term.
Yeah, and one of the things that's very dangerous is it's my understanding that these smart contracts are, or at least they tend to be, they might always be immutable. You can't change them. You can't go in and say, oh, I'm going to make an adjustment to this contract, right? This code it's a contract. It's already quote unquote signed, right? So if there's a vulnerability, I'll be honest, I'm not sure how you would even fix it.
So there actually is a way to fix it, and they've already done it. So way back during the DAO, they ended up hard forking the Ethereum network and literally going back and like undoing history of the Ethereum blockchain, thus breaking the community private or the promise of being like immutable code that nobody can change. And immediately when this happened, like the first thing that said was like, oh, they'll fix it. Like it's an easy thing to fix. Right. I mean, in some ways, maybe they should. Like nobody even got that money. It's not like they took it back from somebody. Like the DAO hacker, like I really thought that was wrong. Like they wrote the code that gave him the money, and he didn't do anything wrong. He just executed the code that they wrote. And
you use the term fix when you're talking about the hard fork. So you're saying I don't think the hacker did anything wrong, but to your solution, you said fix.
Yeah, well, from my perspective, what I thought they should do and like what I thought that contract was supposed to do, and it didn't do what I thought it was supposed to do that, but they wrote it. So they are responsible for the code that they wrote.
I think they might be responsible, but I don't think the hacker is completely blameless either, though.
Right. But just to move on from that, this one, nobody has that money. So they're not like taking it from somebody and giving it to somebody else.
Right.
They're just trying to give it back to the people that just lost it for no good reason. And I think that's almost justifiable, but if you change the Ethereum network at the drop of a pin when anything ever goes wrong, like how is anybody ever supposed to trust it?
The thing is Parity, I mean, is it a blockchain level flaw, or is it, I guess, above?
It's a flaw in the implementation of the wallet.
Yeah, they are a wallet.
But if that's a wallet-based, I mean, can it be fixed at the wallet then? Or
yeah, so what they're going to go do is they're going to reinstate the deleted code that was taken out of the wallet. Like the library for the wallet was deleted, and they can put it back in with a hard fork.
But if it's a wallet, why? I guess because they made a wrong transaction. The wallet made an incorrect transaction, right? Basically,
correct. They had a smart contract that they wrote poorly, and now it sounds like
it's stuck in the Ethereum chain, right?
So the Ethereum developers, the protocol developers, would be bailing out a specific organization, a specific private organization that runs on top of their platform.
I don't know how.
The people that wrote it are also the people that wrote and developed Ethereum.
So it's sort of. I mean, if you did that in any like Bitcoin or any actual decentralized platform, you'd have no luck.
Yeah,
good luck.
And that is the way it should be. Like,
yeah,
this isn't a joke. Like, what it's saying is that if anybody ever leans on the Ethereum Foundation, like a government wanting to censor somebody, they can and will do it.
Yeah, and just they're not just. I mean, if they did it one time, there might be a chance they might be able to get away with it. But if they're just going to do this all the time, I think, did they do it in the last problem in July, I think? Did they do a hard fork for that?
No,
I do not think so, no.
Yeah.
So, okay. But if they're going to do it all the time, they're really going to lose credibility. And if you lose the decentralization aspect, what do you have?
The irony, the one thing that I find maybe the most ironic is that Ethereum is supposed to be, the whole point of what they were supposed to be doing was decentralization.
Unstoppable code, I believe, is their catchphrase.
Unstoppable. Yeah. And then they made it.
I mean, we've been through this before. I mean, this isn't the first time, but it's just it gets old and it gets depressing.
Honestly, I think they probably did learn their lesson. I don't think that they're going to do a hard fork to fix this. I think that they're going to have to let it lie.
You think they're going to leave $300 million there?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, it's just.
And that'd be great. I think that would be great for the price. That'd be great for the price. It's burning $300 million. And it just the confidence you'd probably get in a chain like that, because eventually, I think one of their rationales or reasons for doing it early on was that it was early. It was an experiment, and that they that they do it then and they wouldn't do it going forward, which it's still problematic.
Yeah, I think what you said is true. Like, you're burning a bunch of money, so there's less of it. That's true too. But also, they will be proving that they are actually committed to being immutable, unstoppable code.
They're adding confidence to that.
Sure.
Proving. I think they've already proved it. Yeah.
Yeah. So how would I say it? One argument that they are using to say, oh, well, we're not going to hard fork because of this, is they're saying, well, the next hard fork that comes, they're just going to sneak the code in. So like some kind of a technicality.
Yeah, I do think that is a proposal, but I don't think that will be a technicality to anybody. I think even if they wait for the next hard fork and then sneak it in, like everybody's going to notice. Like it's not like they can sneak it.
That's
right.
good.
And at that point, they're a kingmaker almost, right? Because they're going to pick and choose who they're going to bail out and who they're not going to bail out. That is some very shaky ground to be on, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's ground that they entered themselves.
If you really just wanted to screw with them like that, you could just make a private organization, make a wallet, do a stupid thing, and put you wouldn't want to put millions of dollars, but maybe put $1,000 and be like, hey, why aren't you bailing me out? It'd be a good publicity thing,
So one of the not excuse, I guess I shouldn't say that. One of the arguments that I heard being touted by Ethereum, I want to say developers, but maybe it wasn't developers, maybe it was just advocates, is they said, well, technically Ethereum is still in beta. So do you think does that sway things at all? Technically, it's not. They're not claiming for it to be a stable code. So if something screws up, maybe they can kind of finagle it.
Technically, Bitcoin's in beta.
So this begs the kind of the larger question of,
if it was testnet, it'd be a different story, right? That's supposed to be a forkable thing. So that's where you're supposed to be able to do your errors and get all your bugs cleaned out to actually get the real thing where it is frozen, and that's the whole idea. I mean, that's why you do have the fork and you have Ethereum Classic.
Yeah, the beta idea doesn't hold water for me at all. If it was a beta, it would be obvious, just like it was on the Bitcoin test network. Like the value of the coins would be nothing, and obviously they want these coins to be worth something. So
yeah, and that would just bring up the question of, well, why don't you just always keep things in beta? Because then you can just manipulate things as you please, right?
It's really like a marketing thing. I think once they get to the point where they have enough money and stuff, and they want a push to try to overtake Bitcoin or something like that, then they might change the tag from beta to stable or something. But it's just marketing.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And to be fair, a lot of projects are still in beta. The ecospace is young, but man, even with it being young, it's had plenty of growing pains. And Ethereum's a few years into it, and we're still having these sorts of major issues. And to be honest, the more money that comes in, the more targets there are. Makes you wonder whether these will ever really go away, or will there always be these sorts of dramatic, big money gains and losses, especially the losses, even going forward 10 years from now?
I think it has to go away eventually. Just like on Bitcoin, eventually we have to hit an equilibrium and price has to kind of stabilize. If it keeps going up like gangbusters, it'll never be useful. So, yeah.
I think one thing too that, and hopefully people are starting to realize this, is that Ethereum with the smart contracts, they write smart contracts in these languages in code, right? And I guess there's a question of whether or not a vulnerability in that sort of code or a wallet's written code is a vulnerability or an issue with Ethereum itself. So one thing I did notice is as dramatic as this vulnerability in this, I don't know if hack's the right word, but as big as this story was, Ethereum seemed to have essentially its price went down a little bit, but it recovered pretty much within 24 hours. Maybe some of that is just related to the SegWit2X news, but maybe people are starting to realize maybe not who's to blame, but maybe they're becoming more resilient to these sorts of more isolated issues.
Well, I feel like most of the community that was sensitive to that did go off into Ethereum Classic and or just left Ethereum, but that's still, I mean, for me, it's still a very big long-term issue. That's why I really just don't have a lot of Ethereum.
All right, fair enough. So I think that's enough about that story. So we're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, we'll be covering some of the other recent developments that we've seen in cryptocurrency this week. For those of you listeners out there enjoying the show, I'd love to get your feedback on how I can improve it. I can be found on Twitter at Captain Crypto HD and on most social media as Captain Crypto or Captain Crypto Show. Whatever the platform, just look for my logo. Also, be aware that due to the technical aspects of each platform, that my podcast feed will always have the most up-to-date and latest revisions of each episode. So, if you're enjoying this podcast, please give us a review on iTunes or share this episode on social media. Now, back to the show. And welcome back. So one of the stories that I saw this week was, I believe, from Motherboard. They came out with an article that started talking about how much energy is consumed on the Bitcoin network. And essentially, it sounded like it was a lot. And they came up with a rough calculation, if I remember correctly. They were saying that for one, given how many transactions are in a block and how many blocks get mined and how much hashing power on the Bitcoin network goes into mining, they said one transaction on the Bitcoin blockchain is roughly the equivalent of the average home's energy consumption for one entire week. So I guess my question is, I'll start off with Jacob. Is this an issue? Is this only a PR issue? Is this a major issue? What are your thoughts?
Well, Bitcoin's super inefficient right now just because of the number of transactions we have, and it's really pushing security more than scalability. What I'd want to see would be to project going forward with things like Lightning Network that are going to be able to fit more transactions into really the same amount of electricity usage. And compare that to other things like the current financial institutions of credit cards or even other alternative currencies and really see that. But I mean, it can be bad on PR but I really don't think Bitcoin is like a really bad greenhouse thing in the long term.
Yeah, definitely in the long term, I would probably agree with you. Jackson, what do you think? What are your thoughts? Is this an issue?
I think it is a necessary evil, unfortunately. I mean, this isn't like a new issue that nobody's ever talked about before. People have been like talking about proof of stake as like the golden goose for as long as Bitcoin has been around. But unfortunately, nobody has been able to crack that egg yet. The good thing about this is that it is very adaptive. So it's only going to go as high as people value it. So if people value having a database of transactions and records that is completely immutable back to the very beginning of the network, then we'll keep on spending more electricity on mining. But if it ever becomes less valuable than it's worth, it will automatically adjust and go down.
Although the flip side of that for the market is going to be the electricity price. If electricity costs for some reason go down a lot, you're going to see tons and tons of electricity because it's just going to be cheaper to do at that current price. So you're going to see a lot more, probably a lot more greenhouse pollution just because of the electricity. So you have both those markets working together.
Yeah, I agree. And that will be a problem. But what I'm hoping to see, and I don't think that we've seen this yet, is to start seeing Bitcoin start pushing other industries to get better. So we already have hit like the technical limitations of chip fabrication for Bitcoin mining. And I would love to see Bitcoin mining like actually push that industry forward to be able to make a more efficient chip and then see that spread into other industries.
Right.
The other thing I'd like to see is people being able to find how to make cheaper, cleaner energy and using that to improve their Bitcoin mining, but also letting that spread into other industries. I think that would be an amazing thing to happen, and I can see it happening in the future just because of how lucrative Bitcoin mining has been. Mm-hmm. But it hasn't happened yet, that's for sure.
Yeah, but I think that's already, to a certain extent, already happened where Bitcoin mining is using a lot of renewable or like hydroelectric energy sources. So.
Yeah, that's one thing that I've noticed is I've started paying quite a bit of attention to Bitcoin mining, actual mining projects and endeavors within the last, I don't know, I guess you could say about 6 months. And I've noticed that contrary to what I originally thought, sure, there are people using dirty energy. And as a whole, if there's a lot of energy being used, that probably means there will be a lot of carbon emissions. But places like Canada, Russia, and China actually have quite a bit of hydroelectric power.
Just off topic a little bit, but it reminds me of on Reddit. There's this guy who's posted for quite some time now. He says he has he's in like San Diego. He's actually local. I think he posts that he has this mining farm, like a farm where he grows food, and then he also, with the excess energy from his solar energy, that he does mining, and he invites people to come out and he takes pictures and stuff. I have no idea. I haven't done any research on it. It's like a sort of a meme thing on Reddit.
And you do have to wonder when you hear about these sorts of things. Oh yeah, we're using solar mine. Like, okay, how much are they? How much hash power do they really have? And these people who are saying, oh yeah, China has a lot of hydroelectric, da da da. Is that just marketing speech, or you know what I mean? Is someone actually fact checking this? And that's one of the reasons why I'm actually glad that this topic is coming up more and more, is because the political climate, pardon the pun, that we live in these days, people are really sensitive to greenhouse gas emissions and pollution. And I have people in my family who are very, very sensitive to this topic. I'm not saying that I'm not sensitive to it, but when I start talking about Bitcoin mining and they read an article about how it's doing all this pollution, it does kind of put me in a little bit of a corner where I have to ask myself, okay, well, are we being as responsible as we can? And at least it does sound like people are, at least within the space, are starting to talk about this more and more. Like you guys said, ultimately, if you could move to proof of stake, or at least have that as an option, a workable option that has been proven to work, then that would help a lot, but we're not there yet. So in the meantime, there is kind of that, okay, well, we're not there yet. What do we do, right?
Yeah, I think the impact, though, overall is negligible. I think we were looking up, it's about the same impact as a small country or a medium-sized country.
But that amount is growing, right?
As the price increases, so it can only go so far.
It does beg the question too then, if, like you said, as the price increases, it brings in more hashing power, then okay, Bitcoin isn't just some, sure, it produces money, but I think the idea is that it produces better money than the traditional money system. So is it, this sounds bad, but is it worth a little bit of pollution in the short term? What do you think, Jackson?
I think that's a hard question to answer. I really do think that this is one of the biggest problems with Bitcoin right now. And I'm going to sidestep that question because it's difficult.
The biggest problem?
One of the biggest, yeah. But one of the things that I thought was kind of interesting is a lot of people in Bitcoin are fairly libertarian and think that as little regulation as possible is good. But just searching my mind for all the mining operations that I've heard of, it does seem that government regulation does seem to be the best thing going towards saving this issue right now. Like in the U.S., the only place I've ever heard of Bitcoin mining happening is up in my home state of Washington, where we have tons of hydroelectric power. And that works out pretty well because of the U.S. regulations, where we have gas taxes and stuff like that to try to deter people from using that as an energy source. But in Venezuela, you have virtually free gasoline.
That's a very political opportunity. So
yeah, I completely agree. But it is the governments that are pushing those opportunities. And
indirectly, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't think it's going to be a problem that's unsolvable, because in the end, Bitcoin mining is about efficiency, and it will end up pushing the limits of efficiency everywhere it can be, whether that is the price of electricity or how effective it is on the environment, how much you can get efficiency out of legal regulations. It is literally going to be the most efficient way to do it possible, because that's the way you'll win in the Bitcoin race.
I know you mentioned that you think it's one of the biggest issues, but I think in the majority of users, miners, I think that's one of the last issues on their minds.
Yeah, I agree. I think it probably doesn't get as much mind space as it probably should.
You're saying which issue specifically?
Just the fact that a lot of electricity is used to generate the Bitcoin blockchain, and I think that is useful and a good thing to have, but as it is right now in kind of the backwoods mining operations, it probably isn't the most efficient way that we can get electricity for the environment, or as far as the environment goes, and I think that is kind of problematic.
I am kind of curious, when you guys have discussions, not necessarily with people within the industry, but people who are maybe only somewhat familiar with Bitcoin, does this topic come up at all? Are they aware of the electricity consumption? Do you think that the mining?
When you bring it up to them, I mean, they don't usually think about it until they understand that mining uses a lot of electricity. If they're that involved, I mean, they'll be concerned until they look at the numbers, I think, and most of them will shrug.
They'll care until they own some Bitcoin and it starts going up and down, and then they start to care less.
They forget.
Yeah, I agree. It's mostly a shrug it off kind of thing, but it is kind of a meme in the Ethereum community where they're trying to move towards proof of stake. to be honest, I've never seen anything that makes me think that'll be possible, but I'm glad somebody's working on it.
I mean, we don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot like Ethereum is, and do something stupid to save a few electricity watts. Electricity.
Right. Yeah, and I'm kind of curious. Was that one of the reasons that was that a major reason that Ethereum wanted to switch to proof of stake?
I think it is the reason. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Really?
That's what I thought.
That's really weird.
Well, that's something we'll have to look into. But definitely that would be a perk if you move to proof of stake. Like you guys have said, that's mostly experimental. I think they do have it with some of the smaller chains, some of the smaller altcoins, but I've never actually played with it.
Yeah.
Just as a thought experiment, what else do you guys think could be the reason for wanting to move to proof of stake?
Oh, a lot. I mean, well, proof of stake isn't. I mean, I know, I think Peercoin was the one who introduced that back in the day. That's another altcoin, and it has other benefits so I think it's with proof of stake, I think everyone has a sort of a vote. And the idea is
proportional to how much money or how much of the currency
right,
they have,
but every user of the coin has a vote. So it's sort of a way to force decentralization. There's it's a little technical.
I think it's actually the opposite. I think it's more of a centralizing force.
Yeah,
well, that's the debate, right?
That's part of the technical stuff, but that's one of the selling points, and also. The no electricity or energy usage, there's that. But it's really mostly about, from what I understand, it's mostly about the incentives and the security that you get from not having this sort of mining and 51% attack.
Yeah, that's
Wouldn't you still have a 51% attack? Just it comes from somebody having so much money rather than much mining.
Right, but once you get it, the idea is once you get it distributed, like if Bitcoin, today was a proof of stake thing. Well, actually, I mean, Bitcoin's a little centralized, but if for a lot of coins, if the idea is that the coin is properly distributed, you wouldn't be able to. Whereas with
here's the question for you though.
Yeah.
I mean, the crypto communities are very well known for being very lopsided. Like they're big whales everywhere, and then lots of other people have very little. So we starting here, and yes, maybe we could get somewhere else. But what would be more decentralized? Everyone in the world's access to electricity, or everybody's in the world's access to Ethereum?
Electricity or Ethereum? Ethereum.
You think that?
Oh, access to
what is more decentralized?
Oh, electricity for sure. But the thing is, mining isn't just electricity.
Is.
Mining is access to cheap electricity. That's the thing.
And mining hardware, of course.
Bitcoin mining is way more centralized than Ethereum ownership.
I don't know if I believe that, but I also think that Ethereum or Bitcoin mining decentralization will spread itself out. It'll become more decentralized, and I think that proof of stake would eventually
so far I don't think
more
it has. So far it's gone the opposite. Maybe in the long term I could see I think what 21 is doing. I think that's really awesome. But and I'm hopeful. I think it's.
Can you elaborate on 21?
It's a big.
Dead.
It's a business. A lot of people
just rebranded just a little bit ago.
What did they rebrand to?
Like pay mail or something like that.
God.
They went with their mailing and getting paid to.
Yeah, I don't even think they know what they're doing. They just have millions of dollars. They're just like, what do we do with this? But they're one of the first. They're a big company that just got a lot of money out of. To me, it seems like out of nowhere. I don't even know what their business plan. And a lot of people are kind of scratching their head about what they do. But they have a lot of money behind them. I think they definitely are. They're U.S. based, I think. And their first sort of project that they were doing was sort of Bitcoin mining in like cell phones or common electronic devices. In every all the little things, and that was there's a big hope behind that you're gonna have Bitcoin mining be decentralized in every single electronic device, and it just helps. It's either a cheaper device, and so gets compensated in that way.
I love that idea.
I like it, but I'm just
the ASICs are just going to destroy whatever you got in your light bulb.
The thing is, you would incorporate an ASIC into your light bulb.
Oh, I mean that would be costly, right?
It could be, but I think the ASIC would pay for itself over its lifetime. Is the idea?
Yeah.
But I'm a big believer in the idea that Andreas has been putting forward for a couple of years now, and that's that as Bitcoin mining technology accelerated very quickly to catch up with the state of the art of modern day computer chips, it was really hard to get miners outside of China and into somebody else's hand to mine.
That reminds me of a little off topic, but just from miners and decentralization and just 21 and what they're doing. They're really, really, this is a thing that has never been possible before. You're able to turn electricity into cash, and that is like to me that's a pretty interesting invention. And it has implications. Like there's actually some like criminal organizations and small and medium size actually stealing from governments all around the world. If you've looked closely at the news stories, I think in Norway there was a guy,
What are they stealing?
Electricity. They're just like hooking up because it's cash. It's like, all these wires all over the place. It's just cash hanging out there. It's flying out there. Right. And you see this already with more traditional things like in Mexico, for instance, where, you see cartels attack oil stations. And it's actually a big thing in Mexico where you have, and it's off. This is
great. I love hearing about this.
So cartels actually will attack a lot of oil stations. The military actually has to guard normal gas stations and oil tanks, and it's actually been a problem. There's been shortages of oil in certain areas. That's part of the reason why Mexico's went through this privatization. Blah blah. But and so really, you're able to turn. And oil's not that easy to turn to cash. You have to go through a black market. But this is
that's what I was wondering. How are they turning into cash?
They're selling on the black market.
Okay, so they're not running a generator with some ASICs.
No. The oil,
but now that's an option.
No, they're not. They're not. They literally are doing that.
They're not up to. Yeah, they're not up to date. Yeah, that's a different thing. But it's the same sort of political thing. But that's the same thing with oil. It's hard. Imagine Bitcoin. This is just easy. There's. I'm sure this is just the beginning where people are just stealing and. Electricity.
What Bitcoiner hasn't thought about plugging in a Bitcoin miner underneath their desk at work?
No, and there's a lot of small scale on that, but this is like a really big money thing because a lot of electricity isn't done in a way because people can steal electricity and people do in like small scale in like third world countries in Mexico as well. They'll hook on and a lot of people just don't. But it's a small amount of electricity usage. You lose 5-10%, and so prices go up a little bit. And you don't notice it. But when you can rake cash out of it, you can just rake tons of cash as much as you can take. People are just going to go crazy. It's like an ATM with free money out. And the thing is, all the infrastructure is just naked. It's just naked and there's no protection on it at all. And so we're going to probably see a change of how the electricity, because this stuff is energy. It's valuable. And for the first time ever, we're able to turn this into cash.
So I know we've been completely off topic.
I'm sorry for the tangent.
Of another thing that I think is kind of an allegory for online for this same issue. And that is the idea of trying to pay people for viewing an advertisement. Mm-hmm. So the idea is that with Bitcoin and the Lightning Network, you could like send a fraction of the money that you made from showing an ad to somebody.
Right.
And that's kind of like an interesting idea. Like you can have, what are some of the projects they've tried to do that like a Reddit where they pay people with real money? Yours, I believe one of them was, and another couple of them. But the idea that you can pay people a part of the advertising revenue that you would make off of their content that they made. But the problem with that is that then you have a way to monetize scamming. So just like you could monetize any form of electricity that you could steal, now you can take any sort of bots and run them to this site and monetize your bot army just by gaming the advertising.
And that's probably something that's going to be used quickly. Like with the electricity thing, it's going to take people a while to catch on. You do have to set up miners and this and that. And it's a work. But the scammers, there's 10 million in India ready to go.
Yeah, but I think this all just goes to say that this is a new, cool technology that's making things that weren't possible now.
And those are negative. I do want all the viewers to know this isn't Bitcoin's main thing. This is a very small thing of Bitcoin, but it's just one of the possibilities and probably one of the things that's because it's a new thing that could never happen before. It's probably going to have big implications on the way that we do everyday things.
Yeah, it makes you, like you're saying, maybe they're just going to have to secure the infrastructure a little bit more, no more, dangling lines. But then also, don't be surprised if you see much more harsh penalties on people who are stealing the electricity, right?
Well, with free cash, it's kind of hard to. The penalties, for...
They'll get better at getting away, right?
That battle actually
There's always people ready to go to jail for free cash, and tons of cash.
That battle actually already started a little bit with electric cars and, plugging them into,
yeah. The thing is, I know, that's the thing. There is, the consumable thing, but you get... it's harder to suck the value out of that in a way. So if you're trying to... do a big scale thing. It's just not scalable. So you could do it a little bit with your own car and your personal thing, and maybe if you have a business and you have 30 cars, you could do it. But it's relatively. Also, Bitcoin miners just use a lot of electricity. Just,
of course,
yeah, tons. And not only that, because they're on 24/7, so they really do use a lot, like a lot.
Yeah, I think it was interesting what you said about, okay, it's becoming easier to convert energy into money, because in my opinion, there are a lot of people who talk about we need to save energy, we need to conserve energy, stop using so much energy. And that's fine. You can conserve to a certain point, but it is human nature. Maybe it's because I'm a civil engineer, now a software engineer, but it is human nature to want to create more and more energy, because the more energy that you have, the more stuff you can get done. So a huge part of science has been the research into finding ways to create more energy. And then obviously the more you use them, you have to try to look at more, I'm trying to think, more sustainable, even maybe some where you're, talking about nuclear fusion, right? So hopefully the idea that we can create more money and wealth, I think that's what I should call it. We create more value or wealth out of energy. Hopefully that does help spawn, like you said, advancements in the energy sector. Okay, so I think that's enough on that topic. It's definitely interesting, and this is a topic that's going to keep on going on for maybe even decades. So we'll have to see. We'll have to check back in a decade, see what kind of crazy, if they got that fusion reactor up and running yet, and more importantly, whether we can get some of that money from it. All right, so there's another interesting development within the world of cryptocurrency, and I think, Jackson, you got the details on this one.
Yeah. So there's this idea that's actually been around for a while of using scripts behind your website to mine cryptocurrencies to help monetize your page. And recently there was a couple of high-profile instances of this. It was on the UFC website as well as Pirate Bay. And I just think it's another interesting new thing that is now possible after Bitcoin. Obviously, not a lot of the mining is being done on Bitcoin because of how high the difficulty is on Bitcoin, but there's a lot of other coins that are able to be mined with regular consumer-grade processors. So I was wondering what you guys thought about that.
Yeah, so I think this specific piece of code is, obviously it's written in JavaScript, which means if you visit a website, then your computer is where this code is being executed. This is where the mining is actually being done on your computer. Your resources on your computer are being done. Now, I believe they've chosen Monero specifically to mine on this one, and I think that's for two main reasons. The first one, of course, is that it's pretty anonymous. So if you're able to pull this off and you don't want to get caught, then Monero is probably one of, if not the currency that you would want to use. But perhaps more importantly, you don't really need an ASIC to mine Monero. In fact, there are no ASICs for mining Monero. I believe you can use GPUs, but in general, Monero's hashing algorithm, which I want to say it's CryptoNight or CryptoNote, something like that, is specifically made to try to resist GPUs and ASIC mining. So the idea is that anyone can mine it on their computer, which is great for decentralization, but it also makes it so that it can be used in, I'm not going to quite say a nefarious way, because I think there's that ethical question here of whether it's okay to be running mining scripts on your user's computer, people who visit your website. But I think in general, it does beg the question whether this is all right to do or not. What do you think, Jacob?
Well, I think it depends on the user, right? I mean, the user ultimately can or should be able to decide what's going to run on his computer. I don't think most people would even notice or care. I think the vast majority of people are just not going to care. What I'm wondering about, I mean, this is really a marketing or PR thing at the end of the day. I don't know how profitable is this?
Yeah, if I had to take a guess, I would say it's probably not very profitable, especially if you're a small site not getting very many people. But
even if you're large, I mean, JavaScript. I mean, I remember doing JavaScript and even like some GPU mining back in the day on like it was late 2012, early 2013. Like one of the first Bitcoin transactions I ever did was buying a pizza based on the Bitcoin I was able to mine on like some school computers, and it just took a while. I mean, because it was just the difficulty was high back then, and now the price has skyrocketed. So I really don't think they're getting anything.
Yeah, I can't speak to exactly how profitable it would be for as far as mining, and of course, the mining difficulty on most coins changes very often, so it wouldn't really stay the same. But I can speak to fairly authoritatively about the alternative of advertising. I used to work in advertising for like the last 4.5 years. And I think that just like on an off-the-cuff average number, per session, per user on your website, you can make like 5 to 6 cents on a normal
Per
like
session?
blog page.
Per person?
Yeah.
I don't know. That sounds phenomenal.
Yeah, that is pretty high. And I don't know that you'll be able to make that up. But I think that there are some advantages. The fact that people are very sick of advertising and everybody's really annoyed with it. If you could just pay a little bit of money to avoid advertising, like maybe you have the option to only have GP or your mining to pay for the website instead of having to be advertising, maybe people would want that. Plus, you can do both at the same time, so it's not costing you, the user, or the website owner, anything to have your users mine for you.
So
as long as you let them know.
Yeah, I'm curious. How do you guys see I assume this would be something in the user interface. What would it look like? How would a user decide, hey, I want to see ads, or hey, go ahead, use my CPU, start mining?
Well, actually, so this mining thing might be like a sort of a gimmick or maybe not that practical, but in general, the general principle is sharing your computer resources in exchange to give the site operator a little bit of money, and that I think can be useful. There's a lot of computer resources, hard drive space, bandwidth, and things like that you can share, not just the CPU power or your GPU. And so the thing is, you can only do one site at a time that way. So I think it's sort of limited. But just generally on the user interface side, like you were saying, I think there are there's sort of a framework for that already with like notifications and things like that for like within Google Chrome, for instance.
Yeah, so I wanted to walk down 2 paths with this real quick. So first up, I think it would be really interesting and useful if we could start in the very far future seeing consumer grade hardware built with mining chips in them, ASICs for mining Bitcoin, so that your PC could mine for whatever site you're on. And I think that's one interesting way to do it. It would decentralize mining, and that would be a big advantage of it. But then the other path you could walk down is just giving your browser $1 to start paying out websites, where that would be a much easier. Yeah, you just put $1 worth of Bitcoin.
There is that. There's like a change tip, but there's like an auto tip thing.
Yeah,
I've used that.
Yeah, there's tons of different ways you could do that. It wouldn't be a problem to figure out a way to do that.
The thing is, when you actually ask people for cash to give, people get stingy. Really quick. If you charged $1 for Facebook, Facebook would die tomorrow.
Yeah, you're saying cash. So I guess this does lead to another, topic here is. So why are we not seeing more of these, like you said, like a plugin, something in Chrome, and the website says, hey, pay us, 1/1,000,000th of a ether, and we won't show you any ads. Do you think that's something that's? I assume people are developing that sort of stuff right now. You would hope, right?
I think Jacob's completely right about that. People do not want to pay for content online. It just doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. Even though you're annoyed with ads, like I think given the opportunity to pay 2 cents for a website visit or to watch a couple ads, like everybody's going to choose to watch a couple ads anyway.
The vast majority.
Yeah.
How much of that do you think is the money factor, and how much of it is, oh God, now I need to load up this wallet. I need to
It's not the money. It's not the money. If you look at the economics of it and you do the whole math, how much you make per hour, how much time the ad is taking up of your time, and how much money it would cost to not watch that ad, it totally makes sense to pay. It does. It just unless you live in a third world country, and then watching ads, you can actually make money by watching ads. But for the vast majority in developed countries, it just makes sense to pay. A penny. Your time is, if you make minimum wage, your time is just worth that much more.
I think from a purely logical economic perspective, you're right. Yeah. But I don't think the psychology works out.
That's what I was getting to.
It's about a paradigm shift almost.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. If you can do it in a painless way, and that's what really a lot of these bigger services, Spotify, YouTube, and they sort of try to gamify the ad experience, like, oh, buy this here, they're pushing you a subscription, so it's like a one-time small amount. They try to make it look like a small amount of money, and so there's like a permission, and they give you a lot of content, right? So YouTube will give you quite a bit of content. Spotify will give you a decent amount, and so Netflix and stuff, they're all trying to do the same sort of thing, and so they're all competing for like this permission thing, and what that really does, what we're talking about, right? It splits up small transactions in one big one that feels less pain because, it's painful to do tons of tiny transactions. It's true that small transactions are less. It's like a psychology thing, but generally, what they're already decreasing the pain point. The thing is, they're centralized hubs. That's the thing about it. Content on Netflix doesn't have what YouTube has, and vice versa. And so you have these centralized hubs, and if you wanted it, and often you want some content from one or the other. So I think if we could see some sort of like decentralized platform where you'd have to have a lot of the people on board, and it'd be a little, the logistics would be a little difficult. But if you could do it in a decentralized way where it interoperates, right? And so you only pay one subscription, and then YouTube gets paid if you watch YouTube, and Netflix gets paid if you watch Netflix. That would be
bundle it, kind of, right?
Right, and that's what they're already doing, and we're seeing a lot of that. And so that sort of addresses the psychology of it, of the pain points and stuff like that. And they are getting some success, but not a lot yet. They still have things to figure out.
I think that actually we might end up seeing this go a completely opposite direction than what we've actually been talking about, and that's like tipping in general. And I think that is a more interesting way of doing it. And I think it's something that Bitcoin can really slot into.
Although change tip died.
Yeah. But
sorry, what was change tip? So I'm not super familiar.
They're sort of they're not open. It's like a centralized.
Reddit? Or
it's actually agnostic to a social network. It's a platform, a centralized platform. It really integrated with Coinbase. That was just a sort of like a plugin. Not really a plugin. It was like it's what it did. It scanned social media networks. So you could go to Facebook and you would at ChangeTip. You would mention the bot on Reddit, Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube, anywhere actually. And it would find you in a few seconds or minutes, and then make a bot an automatic comment and say, "Here's your money. Go here to collect it." Or if you had an account, it would automatically deposit. And you could do very small amounts because it was a centralized service.
Right.
It was really nice, and you they had a lot of the details done really well. I don't remember why. I guess they just didn't have enough use.
It
transaction fees or something.
Yeah,
No,
it was like even if you have a centralized service, you still have to pay out the users at some point.
Oh yeah,
and
they had
transaction fees were the ones that were killing them, and it's already.
I don't think that's what
it's
killed
not
them,
change
though.
tip, but there is one already running on Bitcoin Cash, so that's already possible. But I mean, Bitcoin Cash is not the solution in my opinion, but we are going to see Lightning networks within the next year at least, and then we'll be able to see that again, which will be very interesting. But
I don't think the transaction fees though are what killed them, because
I think it was.
Really? Because the thing is, it was because the idea is the biggest people who are going to actually withdraw are the big content. So the idea is like they get like huge celebrity or something, and then they get tons of tips. And then the withdrawal fee is relatively small, but they were charging a lot outside of the Bitcoin mining fee. They were charging like 1%, and it was like 3% or something. I forget. It was relatively expensive. But I think what killed them was just people not using it. They had people using it, but it just wasn't consistent enough.
One thing I noticed, if you don't mind me cutting in, one thing that I noticed is, especially when I would see it on Reddit, we're tipping, someone posted a really great comment and people would tip them. The amounts that were being tipped were like less than $1. And maybe, I don't know if people just feel weird about tipping someone that they don't know.
People would get mad.
But, there could be a lot of work put into a post. It's like, oh, hey, here, it might, so many Satoshis, you might be like, oh, that looks like a lot. And then you look at it and you're like, oh, wow, that's like a fraction of a cent.
Well,
right?
that's
what I was seeing.
Yeah, they did monikers too, like you could donate a cookie or things like that. And, so they had some of the user experience done nicely in that sense. But
I think that tipping random users, like that's one thing, and I don't think it really matters how much they tip them, but I think that the model that YouTube is using right now, where you can tip and then you get like a little bit of priority on your message. Have you guys seen that?
I have not seen that.
Okay, so
like what Facebook does with posts?
Like in comments?
So you have a live stream and famous YouTubers talking about what their day is like, whatever. And then you can ask them questions in the chat. But if you pay them, it'll get a super chat.
That's actually I thought it was the reverse way, but no, that's actually I sort of like that. That's actually
it's
sort
creative.
Of that reminds me of the email type of service. That email service where you have to pay to get into it, get to show up in your inbox at all.
Yeah,
and you get the money back if they
the
open
21 model or whatever they're called now.
Yeah,
but
so
I think if you follow that whole idea in conclusion, like you could have a cool service where it's completely Bitcoin driven and you have the YouTuber go on there and they can get tips, But then to actually run the service, like the user is actually the creator, and so they actually have to pay for their hosting.
The
but
problem
they don't
that
have to give them the split of whatever their tips are.
The problem that I see, and I think I saw with ChangeTip as well, they had this issue, and that's why they tried to make this process a little easier, is that no one has Bitcoin. So if you don't have any Bitcoin to tip...
that is exactly true. This is a futuristic scenario.
If they did some things to try to help with that, but I think that was... I mean, if you don't know what Bitcoin is, and, if there's any amount of learning curve, I think people just get turned off and go to the next thing, really. It has to be a really integrated and interoperated system.
So, go ahead.
I was just going to agree and say that I don't think Bitcoin is going to change the way that we monetize internet traffic anytime soon. This is all theoretical.
Yeah, well, that's one question I was going to ask you guys. You've talked about some hypothetical ways that it could be done. Let's say, how long do you think it'll be until you have some sort of account that's, in your browsers, hooked up to maybe a few of the coins you have, and you have the big service providers, YouTube, Google, Facebook? How long until you have a service where they're plugged in and it is seamless?
Well, I don't think you're going to see any of the big... I mean, I don't know why exactly. Partly because Bitcoin is probably just niche and small at this point, but I don't... Google, Amazon, Facebook, they haven't really been interested in, really engaging Bitcoin at this point. And I think it's okay because Bitcoin just really isn't ready in terms of, we don't have Lightning Network or anything. So right. I think we need some time to get things ready. But I think it probably will have to be a sort of a top-down approach. Maybe not a big corporation, but at least some sort of project. Like, it can be a small startup or something that does it, but we are going to have to see some sort of unified experience that at least hides all the complexity for it to catch on, if we ever want it to catch on.
What do you think, Jackson?
Yeah, I agree completely. I think that maybe within 2 years we might see a semi-successful Bitcoin enthusiast version of this, but I don't think we'll ever see it on major players unless somebody else had already proved that it's going to work.
Unless there's pressure on them or something.
And right now there are decentralized ways of doing tips. If you actually want to, if you want to be a Bitcoin enthusiast and tip, you can do it on any platform. There's tools out there.
Okay. So I think we're going to close down this episode with one last topic, and I'm just going to bring this one up because we've mentioned it several times. So I guess I'll try to give a breakdown of what it is. We've talked about Lightning Network. This is a proposed feature for Bitcoin, and I believe they're already starting to work on it on Litecoin as well. And essentially, it's a second layer where you can create a channel between you and someone, and you can have payments go back and forth without it actually being broadcasted on the blockchain. Now, eventually, you once you have done enough transactions and you decide it's time to settle your accounts or your balances, your wallets on the blockchain, then you do that. And the idea is
I add one thing to your definition?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So what you described, I think on accident, is just that it's a payment channel. And the Lightning Network will be a network of payment channels so that you can hop between different people.
Right. So you'll have a channel ideally for every relation between you and someone or something. Is that correct?
Yeah, not necessarily. You have a path to everybody. So maybe I only have a channel to you, but you have a channel to you have a channel to Jacob, and you have a channel to Amazon. And so if I want to pay Amazon, I don't need a channel to Amazon. I just pay you to pay Amazon.
Oh wow! So you can go through intermediaries.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Okay, so that's news
so you
to
don't
me.
need a channel between everybody, which is good because channels are expensive. It takes a opening Bitcoin transaction to create a channel, and it also takes a closing Bitcoin transaction.
And I think that there are. I mean, there's a lot of details surrounding all that: how to open a channel, how to close it, and do it, and and also like someone can close a channel, and then that can close a lot of channels, and then you have to, you basically have to reestablish the channel.
Anyway, can we toss it back to you? Sorry,
there are very technical details, and I've actually started reading through the white paper, and it's very technical. I do have a technical background, but I think there are some things where they maybe don't explain it too well. I guess sometimes engineers are not always the best writers. But so I was going to ask, without getting too much into the sticks, right? What do you guys think of it in general? Do you think it's something that could work? Does it cause centralization? Is that a concern? And maybe what timeline do you think it could actually start being implemented and used successfully, if at all?
I think it's going to be the Netscape moment of Bitcoin. Like, I think it is going to be huge. I think it's what's going to be actually the thing that allows us to actually start propelling this towards actual mainstream consumer use cases.
Yeah, definitely. It solves problems I've been talking about, and everyone's been talking about for years, really. There are other solutions besides Lightning Network, so I don't know what's going to take the cake at the end of the day.
I'm curious, what sort of solutions are you talking about? Are you just talking about bigger block sizes or no?
No. There's other ones too. There's like, and also I think there's different implementations of Lightning Network.
Oh, there's definitely different implementations.
And but beyond Lightning Network, there's different other things on top of Bitcoin. There's a lot of like.
If I could speak to the other part of your question about whether or not it will centralize, one, I don't think it really will, and I think that they're really incredibly bright people working on this, and that is their main goal, and I don't think it matters.
Yeah,
it matters a lot that we don't centralize Bitcoin, but if a Lightning Network centralized, that's no big deal. Like, if somebody comes up with a better idea, we can move to another one. If it's a centralized network, you just don't trust it as much as you trust the underlying Bitcoin technology.
Right. I think it can be a little problematic if like the vast majority of wealth is on the Lightning Network and only moved on, and people don't hold like, I guess, the keys or the majority of people's like savings are now on the Lightning Network because it just gets trusted, and then it happened to be pretty centralized, so we just screwed the whole network over. I think it can get to that point. I don't think it will, or I think that's like that's a pretty deep, what's it called, like a rabbit hole or
I actually don't think that that's going to be a problem at all. The problems with centralization and Lightning Network don't have anything to do with like censorship or being able to
denial of service,
to be able to freeze funds, and even denial of service isn't a problem.
I think there's
what is a problem is information about transactions. That is definitely something that centralization could be a problem.
How so? Go elaborate on that.
So, say we have like the very worst case scenario of the Lightning Network, and everybody is just paying Amazon all day. And so, if I want to pay you, I pay Amazon to pay you. So Amazon gets to see everyone's transaction as it goes through them as the central routing hub.
How's that different than Bitcoin today?
Because I wouldn't go through, that would be like a bank today. If I wanted to use Bitcoin today, I would just pay directly to you.
But it's broadcasted to the blockchain.
Correct, but it's just broadcasted pseudonymous accounts. So
Lightning Network doesn't have names. I mean,
not necessarily, but if you're sending it through an Amazon payment channel, and your payment channel has previously bought yourself something on Amazon and send it to you.
You can de-anonymize it that way. Although I think Lightning Network, for the vast majority of cases, and what's expected is to have much better degrees of privacy, right?
I don't know. I don't think it is much better, but I think it is possible to do it in a way that preserves a lot of privacy. But I don't think it's better, but I think you can preserve about as much.
I thought that was one of their
privacy
selling points, but I may be wrong.
Yeah, well, I think it's definitely very early on. I don't know when they're planning on actually implementing it, and implementing it is not the same as implementing it successfully. I think you guys have touched on it. My biggest concern has always been centralization. That's why I started reading the white paper. But with Bitcoin, if there's one thing that we've learned with cryptocurrency in general, is that sometimes you think something is not really possible, but when you have the brightest minds working at it for months or years on end, eventually it reaches a point where it does become possible, and it can completely change everything. And so I'm glad to hear you guys are optimistic about it, because I am as well. I was not as optimistic, as recent as a few months ago, but I think you're right. If it's something that can be implemented successfully, then it's something that could be a huge, absolutely huge game changer.
And it has been on Litecoin.
So that's what I was wondering is, have people been using it?
Oh, no one uses Litecoin. But it works.
Well, then how can you call it a success? You're just talking about on testnet or actual transaction?
I think it's on the Lightning Network.
They have done a Lightning transaction.
Yeah.
And
so
they've done a Lightning transaction on Bitcoin too. But there's a difference
between... They've done it on Bitcoin? Like on the Live Network?
Yeah, I
guess
day one
after
of
SegWit. Yeah, SegWit.
They did it across Twitter.
True.
They just passed back and forth the proofs that they needed to do a channel.
Yeah, that's true.
Did it that way. So a payment channel is... easy provable technology has been done, but the problem is being able to route those payments in a way that isn't going to lose too much anonymity.
Yeah, you got it. And I think the other thing is, when you hear, they're already using it on on Litecoin, they call it Lightning Network LITE, I think, on Litecoin. Is they're probably doing it from the command line. You're talking about they're in the matrix pretty much over there.
Yeah.
Until your grandma can use it and just go, press a few buttons. Then
we're not ready at implementation level. We're not even ready for. I don't know about years. I think we've made a lot of progress. I've seen a lot of progress on the implementations and a lot of like betas and some even like some GUIs already. So
Yeah,
I think we're getting there. I think it's gonna I don't know about the transition. That's a little bit weird for me, but I'm optimistic we'll figure that out.
Just a soundbite. I consider myself fairly educated on all things Bitcoin, and I downloaded
watch out.
I downloaded the Lightning beta that they put out a couple days ago. I couldn't figure it out.
No, it's completely different. The
Yeah.
whole architecture.
Beta, it is a what? Is it a command line tool or is it a wallet? Or
It's on testnet.
Okay.
And it is a wallet. And they didn't try to make it like UI beautiful or anything like
Yeah.
that. And it wasn't that I couldn't figure out what the buttons did. I couldn't get the thing to sync. So I don't know what was up with that. I don't know if I had ports open or anything like that.
Yeah,
but
they have some work to. Yeah, just look at the helps on
if there is any.
Yeah.
These are the engineers don't always like to do lots of documentation.
But there's always users who are like try different 10 million things and then one ends up working. So.
All right, so that's enough on Lightning Network. That's a very advanced topic that you'll probably hear us talk more and more about as time goes on. Hopefully by this time next year, it'll be something that people will be using quite a bit more, and hopefully people will start being very excited about it. So I guess we'll end the show here, but Jackson, before we go, why don't you tell the users where they can find you? Are you active on social media at all or not really?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, just under my real name, Jackson Miller. And I also run a YouTube channel called The Dirty Bit, where I try to talk to newbies in Bitcoin and try to explain and answer any questions that they have.
There you go. And then Jacob?
I think I'm on Twitter too. It'd probably be under my name of Jacob Bubble. I haven't posted in a while. But.
Okay, that's fine. We'll check back in a couple of weeks to see if he's. I'll keep on prodding him to get a little active. Obviously, you can find me at Captain Crypto HD on Twitter. You don't need to find the podcast feed because you're already on it probably. But that's it for tonight. So till next time, guys, remember when it comes to the world of cryptocurrency, set sail.